We would like to offer a warm welcome to all of you who have taken time to join us. My name is Kelly Mountain, and I'm one of the coordinators at the Special Education Parent Resource Center. We all know it has been an incredibly challenging time for all of us around the world, within our country and state, and in Arlington as well. All of us are experiencing changes at a rapid rate, and the need to be flexible has taken on a whole new meaning. We know that. Those of us with children with unique talents and needs have had even more challenges, and it has been a very, very difficult and frustrating spring for you all especially. We hope this session will help to jumpstart your students' learning as we move towards September 8th. And now I'd like to invite all of our presenters to introduce themselves as well.
Erin, do we still have you? You might be muted.
Well, that is a sign of 2020. Welcome. My name is Erin Donahue. I'm an autism low incidence disability specialist with the Office of Special Education. Thanks for having me today.
Hi, everybody. I'm so very glad to see you. I'm glad you could join us. My name is Kathleen Donovan, and I have the great privilege of working at your Parent Resource Center, which is part of the Office of Special Education in the Department of Teaching and Learning.
Hello, I'm Deborah Hammer, and I'm also an autism and low incidence disability specialist.
Hi, everyone. Again, I'm Kelly Mountain, and I'm with Kathleen at the Parent Resource Center.
Okay, so I'm thrilled to be co-presenting with my wonderful colleagues, and this is sort of our take a breath slide. As Kelly mentioned, we found ourselves thrust into virtual learning in the spring pretty unexpectedly. And we are here again, and here we go. We are working together to ensure that we as a community support our children. And we know this is so challenging in so many levels, but having been in this district for a long time, what I also know is that the incredible talent and expertise and commitment and dedication of our teachers, our administrators, our students, and of course of you, our parents, will be what supports us and helps us be successful in this unbelievable endeavor. So we have a lot of great information to share today. We know that each one of these topics could be a presentation in and of itself, but what we're hoping to do is help us figure out when we have something overwhelming, like trying to sort out virtual schools. One of the best things I think we can do whenever we're faced with kind of a large project is break it down and to think about which parts of the tasks in front of us are within our realm of influence and control, and how do we navigate this to the best of our ability? So we've designed our session today to look at several things. First, as parents, how can we become familiar with school schedules and how can we sort out schedules at home? How do we structure the home learning environment to support success for our children? Um, and then as families who have students who might be receiving special education supports, what are the unique needs that we really need to focus on and interact and collaborate with IEP teams to ensure are supported? So that's what we're hoping to accomplish today. And we're looking forward to sharing this information. We hope this will be just the first of many resources that will take deeper dives and provide more information in the future.
So IEPs are tools to help students access learning. So let's begin first by understanding together what our virtual learning schedules will look like this fall. Deb will walk us through school schedules and will then share some strategies for how we can structure schedules at home. Some schedules may look different based on a specialized program and also your students' needs.
So here's a sample pre-K schedule. And all of these are available on the APS website, but they are just examples. They're going to vary depending on your child's teacher, their school, their age, and other factors. Okay. Here's an example of a K through 5 one, and you can see that Mondays will be different from Tuesdays and Thursdays and the rest of the week. And you'll also see that depending on what grade they're in, it may look a little different. And next we have a sample middle school schedule. And you can see that it's divided into synchronous and asynchronous learning, which means that they'll be spending some time live with their teacher and other times that they'll be working more independently. And here's an example of a high school one. And again, these are just samples, so it is going to vary.
And Deb, are these samples posted online?
They are on the APS website. And here is an example of a countywide program, such as a MIPA or Functional Life Skills program. This is just the morning, it actually got cut off, but you can see an example of what that might look like. So students with IEPs have different delivery models, and they have those in school and they have that with online learning as well. And these are the different types of services that they might receive during the day. First, we have consultation and monitoring. And this is when a teacher or therapist works either directly with you as the parent, or they're consulting with a classroom teacher to provide advice and support for whatever instruction your child is receiving. Next, we have special education support in the general education setting. So if your child is taking an art class or a general education math class, for example, the teacher or a therapist might push in to provide some special ed support. Next, we have special education support in a special ed setting. This is going to be a teacher working either directly with your child, possibly one-on-one, but most likely in a small group or in a slightly larger self-contained class setting to provide the instruction that your child requires. Next, we have related services. And this is if your child has OT or speech or any other related service like counseling on their IEP. These are the therapists and specialists who will be working with them. And that could look like working with them one-on-one or in a small group, or they might push into whatever classroom setting they're in. Finally, we have support from our special education assistants. This is really vital. Our paraprofessionals will be doing a lot of training coming up in the next couple of weeks, and they are going to be providing either support with the special education teacher and the general education teacher, or they might be working one-on-one or in a small group with your child. We also have accommodations, of course, just like you would have in a regular classroom during the school year. The accommodations that your child requires from their IEP will also be provided in online learning. And this might look like a movement break, extra time to do a test, or whatever else is written into the IEP. And your child's case carrier will be reviewing those with you and what that might look like for them in online learning. So we have some tools for success to help your child be as productive and supported as possible in the home. And that's going to look a little different from the regular school year, but here's some ideas for how you can best support your child and have as productive and happy a school year as possible. First one we're going to talk about is timers. Children with disabilities often have difficulty with the concept of time. So if you say 5 more minutes, they don't really know what that feels like. So having a visual timer that shows them what 5 minutes actually looks like, and they can see the time going down, that can reduce anxiety, and it can also help with those transitions, which a lot of our students really struggle with. So that way they know we have this amount of time for learning, or this amount of time for reading, or this amount of time for a break. And there are lots of visual timers that are available. You can either purchase them, an actual physical timer like the sand timer that you see, or you can download them to a computer or iPhone or any other device and have these virtual timers. And some of them are really cute. Like you see the one with the lion, it's a face that disappears. Some of them have other types of visuals, so it's a little bit reinforcing. And other ones count down or change colors, or you can see the numbers. And what works best is going to depend on the age and the interests of your child. Yeah, our next strategy are visual schedules. So I know that the first thing that I do every morning is check my phone to see what my schedule is. And that helps me know where I need to be at a certain time. It helps me know how much time I might have for a lunch break or none at all. And it also helps me know what comes next. And that predictability is really important for children with disabilities. So even though your child may have a printed schedule that is from your teacher, they might require a little extra support. And your child's case carrier or the therapist that they work with can help you craft one specifically for your child. But I want you to see a few different examples of what that might look like. It might look like a picture schedule where they complete a task and then you move it off the board or move it over, and that can be done with Velcro or magnets or whatever else you have lying around the house. The pictures can be either photographs, or they can be downloaded from Google Images, or you can use software like something like Boardmaker. And if you go to Boardmaker Share, you'll see a lot of different templates that are already there for you. And you can also have one that's laminated or put into a plastic sheet and that you can cross things off. Or you can have one on a device like a phone, computer, or iPad. And those can be really great. I personally like one called ChoiceWorks, which costs a little bit of money, but it's very user-friendly and can really help your child know what comes next. It also can read it aloud, so you can have it both visual and auditory. And you'll see an example of that one in the bottom right corner. But there are also other types of software and apps that are available to help you create a visual schedule for your child. Next, I want to talk about breaks. Breaks are really important. Everybody struggles sometimes staring into a screen all day and sitting, so you might want to put some structured breaks into your child's day. And there are all different types of brain breaks. They can be things like playing with a fidget, doing some exercises. They can go to an app like Go Noodle. There are many different types of brain break activities that are out there, so please consult with your child's teacher or an occupational therapist, or you can even Google brain breaks for a certain age level and you'll see all kinds of websites and activities that you can make a menu for your child so that they can get the kind of sensory, intellectual, and physical break that they need to keep going throughout the day. Now, I do want to stress that a break is different from free time. So a break should be structured. It should look like a particular activity. For example, if the activity is doing jumping jacks, that's what the break should be. If the break is doing a yoga video, then it should just be the yoga video. It's not the child going off and having a snack or watching TV or doing something else that they can do in their free time. So a break should be very structured. It should last for a very specific amount of time. You could set a timer for 3 minutes or 5 minutes or whatever you structure the break for. And then the child should immediately go back to the activity that they were doing before the break. So I really want to talk to you about flexibility. That's going to be our word for this school year. We all know that things don't always go as planned, and we're in a pandemic. We're all going to have to accept that things might change, schedules might change. the expectations might change, the learning platform might change, but we're going to learn how to do this together. Your child's teachers, the paraprofessionals, the therapists, parent resource specialists, and your other specialists like our autism low incidence specialists. We're all here to support you. So if you're feeling overwhelmed or anxious or stressed, please talk to somebody, consult with us. We are happy to help you. Remember, everyone is doing the best they can. The school, the teachers, your child, and we know that you are doing the best that you can as a parent. So be kind to yourself, be kind to your kids, be kind to your teachers, because everybody is under a lot of stress with what's going on in the world, all the uncertainty, and it can make things really stressful, but it's okay. We want to just make this as smooth as possible, as happy as possible, learn as much as we can, but know that if things don't go as expected, it's okay. So again, be kind to yourself.
Deb, thanks so much. Those were great tools and strategies. Now Erin will share some ideas on how we can structure a home learning environment.
Thanks so much, Kelly. I know that this is a really huge topic and often a really big concern for our families. There's no one right answer. Your home is different from my home and your neighbor's home. So I think my number one piece of advice is really to work within your home, your family, and especially your learner to devise a plan of what that's going to look like. First thing to consider is where to work. Where are we going to find space in our homes, especially when everyone is working and learning within the same space? So one thing to consider is really thinking and working with your child. Do they want to be near you or do they want to be in their own space? So decide with your learner where they will work the best. And that may even change throughout the day, having multiple work zones throughout your house. So once you've considered whether they want to be close or separate to you, the next thing to think about is, do I have multiple kids? Do we have siblings? Do we have neighbors' kids that are joining us? And if the answer to that is yes, then deciding should they be working together in the same space or not? And if they are, then maybe you consider how you can devise a divider. That can be done for pretty low cost. You can use a curtain or a shower curtain. If you have a bookshelf, or it might be one student working in the dining room or the eating space and the other student working on the other side of the wall in the attached living room or bedroom. But really thinking through having two students on video calls at the same time can be problematic in the same room. So that's one thing you really want to think about with multiple students and family members working in the home together. The next thing you really want to think about is, where should my student be based on distraction levels? If your student is easily distracted, should they maybe be facing a wall rather than the room where everyone is operating and making lunches? And then the next thing we want to think about is finding that space. You know, not everyone has a massive home. Some of us are working in smaller spaces, and that's really okay. Most of us are working in tiny spaces. So there's no time like now to find that extra space. And I promise that it's there, whether it's in your apartment. You really can create a work nook. You can use a table, you can fashion a desk out of just about anything, and you can set up a space just about anywhere. It's really about looking around your home to find what you're not really using right now. It might be that underused eating room, or even an underused bedroom. Oftentimes we sleep in our rooms and then they don't go used for the rest of the day. So that might be your perfect space. And then lastly, we all know that storage is a constant battle. We live in Arlington. So one thing to think about is where you're going to find that storage space. Because we're going to be working from home, we are going to have some materials that we're going to need to store. And we all know that having a plan for storage and easy accessibility makes the learning process go smoother. So really, number one, you could go up if you need to. If you have the money available, you could think about building up and adding just some inexpensive bookshelves to store items up your walls if you don't have the opportunity to build in up to bring in a larger bookshelf to store things. And while bookshelves are nice, it's not always a possibility. Another good idea is to grab a rolling storage cart with 3 tiers to set up your learners' items. And if you don't have the time or the money to run out to grab a rolling storage cart, that's also not a big deal. You can find bins and boxes and collect all of your learners' materials within those, thinking about where you're going to put the chargers, where you're going to put your devices, the pencils, the papers. Those can all be stored in just boxes and materials that we can find around our home. Another easy idea is just getting your learners' materials in one of those kind of zippered binders. Those can also be used to store your device, your pencils, your markers, your charger, and everything. The big take home from this is really keeping all of those things together so that when you show up for learning, your materials are all in one place and your student is not having to get up from the device, from the computer, and moving to find those materials and then rejoining the class. All right. I think the kind of closing thought on that too, though, guys, is we all get on Pinterest. We're looking and we see these beautiful homes and these beautiful workspaces. And remember, Pinterest doesn't make good learning. It's really just, a supportive home environment that's been planned and thought out. So the next thing I want to talk about is this idea of what is that workspace actually going to look like? So we've talked about devising a plan and kind of a few things to think about once you've identified that space in your home. But now we know that distractions are everywhere. We're all working, we're all in the same space all day long. So consider, is your student going to require headphones with a microphone to participate in lessons? And the answer for your student might be absolutely yes. Another thing to consider might be something like noise canceling headphones. And those are something you can work with your case carrier or a therapist in your student's building to decide if they might be a good fit for your learner. Another option is something like white noise to reduce distraction. That can be done through a fan that moves some air, keeps your student cool and focused, also providing a bit of background noise that will increase focus and productivity. Some of our students work really well with music, and that can be okay, but it also can be really bothersome. I know myself that I can't have music on in the background or I can't pay attention at all. So make sure if your learner really does like music that you've checked with everyone in your home to decide if that needs to be done through headphones or not. And I already talked in the previous slide a little bit about this, but dividers are a really good option to reduce distraction. Curtains, shower curtains, hanging things in between. Tri-boards, the kind of tri-folding boards can be a good option to really identify and section off a workspace, adding a little bit of structure. And lastly, I say this all the time, but exercise really helps. Exercise can really increase focus and productivity. So getting out for a quick walk, going up and down the stairs in your apartment or condo building can really bring a big impact in reducing that distraction and increasing the focus. Another thing to think about is lighting. Can we set up a table lamp to help with writing and pencil work tasks? Small reading lights, and of course, natural light when possible. I want to talk quickly too about ergonomics. I am not a physical therapist, and we have a lot of really good people on staff that can provide more insight into this than I can. But I think just in general, some good guidelines are to try to keep your learner's feet on the floor if possible, and really aiming for kind of a 90-degree angle when typing or writing. But we don't all have perfect desks that are adjusted at the perfect height, and that's okay too. Some other options might be to add a pillow, which removes feet from the floor, but that gives access to a taller table, which might work for some of our younger learners. Another great option is just to stand. Our kids need to move. They're going to be on the computers, so standing and working is okay. And also kind of moving around throughout the lesson. While not great, we want to keep our computers in the same spot, but being able to stand and move using possibly a wiggle cushion is another great option. And lastly, organization. More is to come later on in the presentation on this, but really organization is key. And I had shared this before, but really keeping those materials close together and close to the learner is going to be what brings success to this upcoming school year. And just as a note, there's going to be more information to come, but APS will be providing learning kits to all students, and those are going to be provided towards the beginning of the school year. All right.
Thanks, Erin. In addition to sorting out schedules and home learning, we also want to be sure that we are considering the unique learning needs of our students who receive special education services. As we look at these 6 areas listed here, we know 2 things. This is not a comprehensive list of needs, and 2, each one of these areas could be a presentation in and of itself, but we'd like to at least briefly touch on how families may address these needs at home during this period of virtual learning at home. Deborah is going to share some ideas about how to address sensory and behavioral needs at home.
So most of our students have various sensory needs, and those needs need to be met throughout the day in order to keep our learners engaged, calm, and stress-free as possible. Everyone is going to be a little bit different, but it can affect all our different senses. So we need to find ways to engage for your child. And since you know your child best, or you can talk with your child about what their needs might be, seating is a big one. In school, we tend to use more flexible seating now. It's not always those blue chairs that are attached to the desks, because we know that those don't work for most kids. So they might have a ball chair, they might have a cushion, they might stand up. If you need you don't have to have a standing desk. You can be as creative as maybe using an ironing board or something else that you have lying around your house to think about creative seating. It might be on the floor. So those are some ideas. And again, talk with your child's case carrier. If they have an occupational therapist, consult with them. And it might even be something that APS can help provide you with if necessary. Tactile. A lot of our kids need to have something in their hands, and that might include little fidgets. There are all kinds of little things that you can buy at places like Five Below or World Market, all kinds of little stretchy fidgets like this one I have in my hand, or it could be a fidget spinner, or it could be a squeezy ball. It might be something on a pen or pencil. So every child is different. Some kids like to play with things like Rubik's Cubes, so they might have to experiment a little bit to see what works for them. But remember that it's not a toy. It's a tool to help them focus, stay calm, and stay engaged in learning. So if they're playing with it like a toy and they're not paying attention to what's on the screen, then it's a toy. If it's helping them to stay focused, be able to learn, then it's a tool that's meeting a sensory need. We'll next go to the one on the right, auditory. So as Erin already mentioned, a lot of our kids do better with headphones, possibly listening to music, possibly white noise. All those things can help somebody who is distracted by other noises around them. We want to make sure that things like televisions are turned off during learning time so that that's not an auditory distraction. Oral. A lot of our kids need to have something in their mouths, and that could be gum. It could be a specially designed oral stimulation toy or tool. We have these jewelry, which you see the boy in the orange chewing on, and that is a plastic that is safe for kids to chew on, because we don't want them chewing on their shirts or their hands or something that might harm them. And again, that is something to talk about with your child's case carrier or OT, and they can help make recommendations for your child of something that might help them. And there are also movement breaks that might help them, and that could include a rubber band under their chair that they can rub their feet on, or a ball like a tennis ball under their foot. It could be hand push-ups where they're pushing against their other hand or pushing against the wall. So there are lots of little things, even in a small space, even while learning, that they might be able to do to help meet those sensory needs and keep them engaged in learning. Next, we're going to talk about behavior. So we all want our kids to be happy and be engaged in learning, but we know the reality is that sometimes they're not going to want to. Sometimes they may not want to get out of bed, and sometimes they may not want to sit in front of the computer. So here are just a few tips to help you help your child with expected behavior. First of all, using first then. And you see that in the top right, there's an example of a first then visual. And that is when your child really wants to do something else, like watch TV or play a video game. We might try, instead of negotiating or begging, just telling them first math, then TV, so that they know that the expectation is that they need to do the learning first or their academic work first, and then they can have a reward or reinforcer time. And that might be built into the learning day. That's something, again, to talk with your child's teacher, because they may have an accommodation of having a certain amount of free time. Again, you're going to need to use your timers, or it might be something that happens after the learning day is finished. You want to make sure that they know the clear beginning and end of the work time and of the break time, so that there's less of a difficulty with transitions between the two, and they know that it will end, that something that is a less preferred task is going to transition into probably a more preferred one, and again, back into that learning time. And we want to help them prepare for that mentally. You always want to reinforce the expected behavior. So if they are engaged in the learning, following the teacher's direction, doing an activity, make sure to praise them. And it could be a verbal praise, or it could be through a reinforcer chart, a sticker chart. And sometimes those can just be really simple, or sometimes, like you see the one on the bottom left, it could tie into something that the child is really motivated about, like Teen Titans, Thomas the Tank Engine, or anything else that really motivates them. You might be able to print out a visual of that and use that for your reinforcer menu, so that the child knows that if they stay on task or do a certain number of assignments or write a certain number of lines, that they get some kind of tangible reward that they enjoy. And again, talk with your child's case carrier about how to structure that for your child. On the bottom right corner, you'll see a calming menu. And these are ways to help de-escalate us when we feel stressed, overwhelmed, sad, or angry. They're going to look different for each person. Some people do deep breathing. And for younger children or children who have higher support needs, taking a deep breath can be a challenge. So 2 tricks I use for that are either blowing bubbles or blowing up a balloon, because that encourages a child to use a deep breath. It could be something like just taking a brief walk outside. It could be using an aromatherapy scent, sometimes lavender or orange or other essential oils, or just smelling an orange can make us feel a little calmer. So again, it's going to vary from child to child, but having a visual calming menu will help your child be able to pick the item at that moment that's best for them, or you can support them in making that choice. If a child is really upset, you can help them de-escalate by using a calm voice, quiet voice, because when someone is upset and we get more upset, it upsets them even more. So it's hard to remember, but think NPR voice. And that can really make kids feel a lot calmer faster. Use your sensory supports, whether it's turning off the lights, putting on some calm music, having a weighted blanket, having a little stuffed animal to hug. All of these are things that can de-escalate and make your child and make you feel calmer too. And also avoid threats, avoid yelling or saying you're not going to get dessert or anything like that, because that tends to make people more upset. So in that moment, just remember to keep as calm as possible and to continue to reinforce the expected behaviors that they are doing. Maybe they're crying, but they're still seated, they're still focused in front of the computer. So reinforce that, reinforce the desired behaviors, and that will help everybody feel better too. Now I'm going to turn it over to Erin and Kelly to give you some additional supports.
Thanks so much, Deb. I wanted to take a few moments just to talk to you about supporting our social emotional needs of our students and learners at home. Here, you're going to see some of my most favorite things to talk about. And like we said before, these in and of itself could have been a whole presentation. So I'm just going to share with you briefly today. So in the top left of your screen, you're going to see the emotions wheel. There are many of these that can be found on the internet, on the web. This is one of my favorite things to use with students in the classroom. It really shows us how many emotions are out there and how many emotions that we can experience within a day. We often tend to talk about people feeling happy or sad, and it's really so much more than that. What I wanted to share today is really this idea that letting our students and our learners know that all of those emotions that they feel are really okay. Name and recognizing those emotions throughout the day makes them become more comfortable with them, makes them seem kind of quote unquote normal, because all emotions are okay and are normal. I think it's really important that in this very uncertain time and in this uncertain environment that we are taking time to connect with our learner at home. This can look like a lot of different things: taking a walk together, spending some time snuggling on the couch, or connecting over a book, even sharing a favorite music video or dance time. It can be something little and small. It doesn't have to include any spending of money. It's really just 10 minutes to 15 minutes a day one-on-one really increases those positive connections and then increases those positive emotions. A lot of our learners at school have safe spaces. They have safe people to go to. If you can in your home, creating and identifying that safe space where we can all go, not just our learners, but even us, that we can go and take a moment to kind of reset and find our center. That is really important. And like I said before, in identifying the workspace, doesn't have to be something fancy off the internet. It really can just be a cozy corner, beside a bed, or a cozy corner behind the couch. And last, Deb shared this, but really focusing on and finding the positives in the day and the positive things that your student does. Because when we focus on the positives, we tend to see more of them. We know that positive feedback and reinforcement really works. The next thing I wanted to share with you is the zones of regulation. And there are so many people in Arlington public schools that are really kind of experts on this. The zones of regulation is in most of our schools, and it's a tool that a lot of our teachers and occupational therapists are using. So feel free to reach out to your students' team if you want to learn more. But one thing I wanted to share is this idea that just like emotions are tied to this idea of the zones. And all zones are okay. We move in and out of the zones throughout the day. We might wake up and feel very tired, a little bit lethargic, a little bit quiet, and then we would be in the blue zone. But then after you've had your morning cup of coffee, you might be feeling a little bit better. And then you may have shifted into the green zone and really be ready to learn and to engage and to be present. And maybe you're late for a deadline, you're late for a work task, and then you get a little bit anxious and overwhelmed, and then you've shifted into the yellow zone. And we all know kind of when the red zone hits, that's when, you've forgotten something large and you kind of lose it. But what I really want to drive home is that we as adults shift in and out of these zones all day. And so does your student, and they're all okay. One thing you can do is check in with your learner to see kind of what zone they're in, and then also identify a zone's toolbox. And that's going to be tools that you can use when you're in zones to reset yourself and maybe enter a different zone so that you can re-engage and be part of the learning environment. And those are all strategies that your school-based team can help you with. And lastly, I just wanted to talk about a few other ideas, and I am not an expert on any of these, but these are things that I have learned from other teachers and experts that I've been working with in the schools. Just a few ideas, this idea of taking a moment to be mindful, incorporating meditation. There are a lot of really good apps. There's a lot of material out there that you can access on the internet to incorporate this into your daily routine at home. And I said this before, and I'll say it again, exercise, building in time to move your body, to get outside, to soak up the sunlight has such a positive impact on our students' social emotional needs. And then just a couple other ideas, building in journaling, drawing, art, incorporating music, all give us really positive feedback and feelings. And then once again, and this is really difficult, but how are we going to build in social interaction during this time? And that's going to be something that you're going to have to think about with your own family and what you're comfortable with during this COVID closure. And from there, I will go ahead and turn it over to Kelly.
Thanks, Erin. Great tips. And I totally agree with what Erin said about the social interaction piece. We know that we still have to be really careful about social distancing, but, keeping our kids connected with their friends and family, whether it's face-to-face or virtually with some of these really fun online games, it's just really important. And it really helps to combat some of these areas of social emotional need. I also wanted to just remind everyone that each of our schools or our programs they're fully equipped with school counselors, school psychologists, and social workers. If you're concerned about your student or just need some tips in helping to manage emotions or social concerns, reach out to them. All of these professionals are going to be having office hours and will be working with your students' teachers and teams with regards to students' social emotional needs. I also wanted to take just a minute because I'm sure you've heard a lot about social emotional learning, or SEL, and what does that really look like? And SEL is going to be infused within our kids' curriculum. And what it means, SEL is basically the process through which children and even adults understand and manage our emotions, set and achieve our positive goals, feel and show empathy for others, establish and maintain relationships. So anyway, it's a huge topic, but I just wanted to let you know that a group of our psychologists have developed a wonderful presentation on SEL, and it's also being offered through the Parent Academy, like this presentation is, and it will be up and ready for you all to view soon. And I really encourage you to view it. It explains what SEL is, how it's being implemented within the schools and the classrooms, and then most importantly for you all as parents and caregivers is what you can do at home to encourage positive social emotional development. Okay, so the next big area that we're going to talk about for a little bit is executive functioning. And I am going to turn this over to Erin. We know that social emotional functioning is a big deal for all of us, including our students. And so Erin's going to walk us through the areas of executive functioning.
Hi, thanks again so much. I just wanted to take a moment to touch briefly on the starred areas, and those are going to be coming over the next few slides. But I wanted to take a moment to really highlight that executive functioning covers really much or most of the underlying skills that we need for really accessing instruction and social emotional learning. And so I wanted to give a visual so that you had just kind of something to look at that covers all the different areas of executive functioning. Today, though, we're really going to be talking about the 3 starred areas: the planning and prioritizing of tasks, organization, and then also we've covered sort of the emotional control and the underlying social emotional skills. So the first one that I'll be talking about is planning and organization, this idea of using kind of what we would call paper strategies to organize ourselves at home. I think the number one thing that I want everyone to take away is that planning and organization is really person, student specific. I think it's really important that we are working with our learner and our school-based teams and our families to devise a plan to address planning and organization weaknesses. But that said, here are some of my favorite ideas. These are a few things that I've even used with my own learner at home. So first, we'll just kind of roll right through them. In the top left, you're going to see an example of a bullet journal. This is really any kind of plain paper journal. It can have lines. It can have small dots to form a different kind of like grid on the paper. It also can just be blank paper. And the great thing about the bullet journal is that it is just that. It is a blank space that you can use to plan your day, to record assignments, to write schedules, to make lists, to make notes. It can be just about anything. We do know that for some people with disabilities, that the bullet journal can be a really successful tool because it doesn't have anything that you have to absolutely fill in. You can make it what you need it to be. It's actually a tool that I have used myself for many, many years to keep myself organized and on task. It's a tool that I love. You can see in the picture that they are using it in conjunction with Post-it notes, which Post-it notes are a tool that I'm going to talk about in a moment too. I love Post-it notes. I think that we can do just about anything with them. But Post-it notes can also be used in a bullet journal. So this is one idea to explore, especially if your learner has really pushed back at the idea of using a very organized paper planner. This could be something to try. You know, and while we're talking about all this, I really want to encourage people to think about what you can use at home. This isn't about ordering new tools. This isn't about ordering the big calendar from Etsy or from Pottery Barn. This is really about digging into your home and into your bins and into your materials and using what you already have. So with that said, you can see I've got this kind of idea of this to-do, doing, done, Post-it note schedules, Kanban. This is what I actually have used with my girls in a vertical frame. But this idea of putting tasks onto Post-it notes and building your routine for the day that way is something that you can do really easily in your home. It can be done on a wall. It can be done on a door. It can be done on the frame in between a door and a wall. You can really find your space and set this up with your learner each and every day. Another thing, while not paper, is this idea of using some of our smart devices. And this may be something you have in your home and it may not be, but our students are all equipped with computers and with either a MacBook or with an iPad. And with that comes this idea of being able to build in task reminders, to build routines and to prompt transitions. As we're thinking about this planning and organization, prompting transitions is going to be really important. So setting those reminders into a calendar or building those reminders in advance on an Alexa device or something similar eliminates adults from having to do the constant reminding and the constant prompting of transitions. So that's another option. And then kind of in the bottom right there, you'll see this really simple to-do list. It's a daily planning sheet that you could do in conjunction with your student. This is something that you can find online, that you can handwrite out either in your bullet journal, on a Post-it note, on a sheet of paper. But it's this idea of identifying high priority tasks and then those secondary tasks, and then setting your goal for a day and then making the plan. And then, of course, at the end of the day, you would come back and reflect on what actually was completed. And this is a really good option for students who maybe are not as excited about a larger planner or for a younger student who gets easily overwhelmed, this is just a 1 sheet a day kind of approach to planning an organization. So continuing with planning an organization, I would like to talk about what tools are available on our devices. I mentioned before, and as everyone knows, we have devices that are essentially at this point now one-on-one for all of our learners. And we are really lucky that we have these devices, at our disposal. So wanted to take a moment and share some of my most favorite apps and the online tools that I have used with quite a bit of success with students that I have been working with in the classrooms. So the first one that you'll see is Microsoft OneNote, and this is something that is already preloaded on student devices. It can be accessed either on the cloud or directly on the device. And what's great about that is that if you use it on the device, it automatically syncs and it can be accessed on the cloud. It's really seamless with Microsoft products. It also links directly with Canvas. So we've had some teachers that are using that, and it all kind of syncs together and connects. Another great thing about Microsoft OneNote is that it can be shared between users. So different users can be added, so it can be monitored by an adult. It can also by an adult in the student learner's life. As you can see in the photo, it also has the capability when you have a device that has a touch screen, it can be written on using a smart pen. So Microsoft OneNote is an excellent tool, and I encourage you to take a look at it with your learner and see if that might be something that would be a good option or a good fit for them. The next is Notion, and this is another really pretty great app that is available, and it can be downloaded directly to the computer. It also is available online. What I really love about Notion is that it allows your learner with some assistance to set up direct links to Canvas pages and Google files. So if you have a learner that gets really distracted by opening up the internet and going to the APS homepage and then trying to log on through our APS main system and then trying to find their Canvas page, and then before you know it, they're down the rabbit hole, and all of a sudden they're reading their favorite article on CNN, and they've forgotten that they need to go to Canvas. Notion is a really great tool to kind of eliminate that. So once you get it all set up, you have your kind of section that says Earth Science, and then in that section you have your direct link to the Earth Science Canvas page, and you have your direct link to your Earth Science Google file where you're storing all your documents and files. And it really kind of decreases or can decrease that distractibility in getting down the internet rabbit hole. Notion is also great because it can be shared between users, and similar to Microsoft OneNote, it has the capability for color coding different folders, different files, setting up to-do lists. Things can be moved around. So I encourage you also to check out Notion. It's another really good option. And the last one I wanted to talk about today is Google Keep, and this is part of the Google Suite. So as you can imagine, one of the biggest benefits of Google Keep is that it's pretty seamless with Google products. So when I say it's seamless with Google products, I think one thing to really highlight is that the notes that are taken in Google Keep can be directly added to a Google file. So if you're working with organization with your student and really keeping things in one place, you can take your notes in Google Keep, you can upload your photos, you can add a voice reminder, and all of those automatically can be synced and sent to the Google Drive. It's pretty awesome. It also can be shared between users, and it also can be accessed online or on the desktop. And as I've shared there on the slide, you can set reminders that integrate with your calendar. So that's one of those ways that you can prompt transitions. You can set reminders that you have to join a class at 10:10. All of that kind of works within Google Keep, but same as the other two that products that I have talked about that are available already on our APS devices. And the last is that the speech to text integration is really pretty good with Google Keep. So if you have a student who really prefers to use speech to text as an accessible option, it's pretty seamless also with Google Keep. And if anyone has any more questions, these are all things that you can ask your school-based team about, and then always feel free to reach out to me. So one other big thing is this idea of preparing to access instruction. You know, we are not getting on the bus every morning. Our school day is looking quite a bit different. So one thing we really want to think about is building these routines. So first and foremost, you know, trying to stick to a routine every day really will increase the success. So ensuring that those devices are charged each night and ready to go for the morning, perhaps writing out a task list that is checked off every single night, so that when you end instruction, you plug in your computer, you close all your windows, you close your browsers, and you allow your computer to recharge and be ready to go. As I shared before, keeping devices and accessories in designated spots is also going to be really important, and possibly setting up a charging station so we're not chasing cords all around the house. I know that that's a big one in my home. That's constant battle is, you know, where's my charger? My computer's dying during my Microsoft Teams call. I think we also want to encourage our families to really practice using our various platforms and breakout rooms in advance so that we are really getting comfortable with getting on the computer as much as possible. But please know that your teachers and the staff at your building are really also going to be spending a lot of time with our learners and our students practicing these things. We're not expecting our learners to come in proficient with these tasks. We know that it's difficult and that it's a learning curve, and it's going to include a lot of those unwritten rules and the hidden curriculum for how you're going to access this online learning. We're not expecting you to do that teaching at home, but practicing in advance does always help, and that way you also know how you can support your learner. And the last kind of big idea for this is really this idea of writing our passwords down. I'm recently have left the classroom, and finding passwords, remembering passwords is always a really difficult thing for our kids. So writing those passwords down in a common place and then keeping them where they can be easily accessed. So some ideas, maybe you write your passwords down and you tape them to your device using, once again, my handy Post-it note. So you write those passwords down, and that way your student has them right beside their mouse or on the top of their device or the bottom of their device. Another option is if you have collected all of your pencils and crayons into a pencil box, you can tape those passwords to the inside of the pencil box, and that way they're always easily accessed. Another idea is to tape it in the kitchen cabinet. That's my favorite place to put passwords. Don't tell anyone. But putting those passwords inside a kitchen cabinet, that way the adults in the home also know where they can be accessed. That way we're not scrambling to get online when it's time and fighting that password battle. So making sure those devices are plugged in and charged is really going to be helpful in accessing instruction. So one of my other favorite things to talk about is this idea of planning and prioritizing tasks. And you're going to see kind of a lot of information on your screen, but it's really just some quick tips to start thinking about how to plan and prioritize tasks. One of my most favorite things to do with students is this idea, and I also do it with myself, is completing a brain dump. And basically a brain dump is where you take everything that you need to do and you get all of those tasks out onto paper. If you prefer speech to text, you also can use your voice and you can speak right into Google or into Microsoft and get all of those tasks out. But that's the number one thing you need to do. And then after you do that brain dump, whether you've put them on Post-it notes or you've put them onto a piece of paper or on the computer, the next thing that you're going to do is you're going to determine this idea of what is important and what is urgent. And on the next slide, I'll be able to show you what that 4-square looks like. But I like to use what I call a 4-square or a Punnett square, if you remember from biology, to determine if tasks are important or not important, urgent and not urgent. And once you've sorted those tasks into one of those 4 categories, then you're going to really have an idea of what are your high priority tasks, because we really want to think about helping our kids get those things that are most important and most urgent done first. And those are the same things that we do in our work lives. We try to tackle the things that are really need to be done first. And after you've done that, another strategy that you can try is this idea of determining the effort to complete each task. And some people will say, well, do the one that takes the most effort, the most brain power, the one that's going to be the most difficult for you to do. And I have to say, I don't know that that's always the best. I think it's really person and student specific. Another option is, rather than choosing the one that is the most effort, sometimes you choose the one that's the easiest or the shortest and the one that you're going to complete the quickest. And starting there so that you kind of get the ball rolling and that you're completing things and you're providing yourself with positive reinforcement. So that's really going to be up to you and up to your learner. Do you do the one that's the highest effort and also important, or the easiest but also important? And the last thing is really this idea of being flexible. And Deb talked about this earlier. Things are constantly changing. Our classes are constantly changing. Our workload is constantly changing. Our home environments are constantly changing. And we have to be willing to be flexible and to bend a little bit, and also to change our plans as needed. So kind of in closing with this, one thing that I feel like is really important is this idea of checking in the morning, checking in maybe midday, and definitely debriefing at the end of the day. Setting a time with your learner to prepare for the day, to go over these tasks, to go through this process together, and really think about what classes they have to attend, reviewing those assignments, setting a daily plan, and then at the end of the day, debriefing, reviewing what assignments were completed, what is left to be done, and then starting to think about and setting a plan for the next day. So here's just a little visual to support some of the things that I talked about on the last slide. The first you'll see it kind of on the left there with surrounded in the purple border is this idea of what I was sharing with the 4-square model for determining what is the most important and urgent, important and not urgent, and then moving down to the bottom, not important and urgent, and then not important and not urgent. And you'll see that this is a really easy way to prioritize your tasks. It is really easy to do if you've written all your tasks out on Post-it notes. You can pop those into a 4-square and move stuff around pretty easily. Once again, another win for Post-it notes. You can use this on an app. This is an app called Focus. It's available to be downloaded on to a phone. I would have to clarify if it's something that is used and been approved by APS. But as you can see, you also can easily do this on paper, and it's a really good strategy for determining where to start, especially for our learners who really have a hard time determining what's the most important. Because a lot of times we like to do what we like the best, and not tackling those things that are more difficult for us. And Deb talked a lot about the next one earlier, time timers. I am such a fan of setting timers. It really helps our learners when they are planning and prioritizing, but actually when they start. So using a timer to when you start your homework or when you start an assignment, and then that way you can see the time ticking away until your next break, which is what we really always want to know when that's coming. The next thing I want to talk about is this idea of breaking down large tasks. We see this as an accommodation on a lot of IEPs. Our teachers are doing this in the classroom. They're really good at breaking down our larger assignments. But sometimes it's really up to us too to think about how we are going to break down a larger task so that we can achieve it. So here you can see I've done an example actually using an app on the phone. It's called Todoist. It's an app that I really like, but this can also be done once again on paper or using Post-it notes. But I've broken down how you can read the Odyssey into subtasks so that you can help your learner accomplish that. So I encourage you to think about supporting your student in doing this at home or working with your teacher or school-based team to do this. And lastly, I think estimating how long a task will take is an important task too when we are planning and prioritizing tasks. Sometimes we think that things will take us 15 minutes, and in actuality, they take us 30. So I always encourage families and my students that after you've made a task estimation, that you actually come back and you log how much time that actually took you, so that you can be better prepared the next time you complete a similar task, so that you have adjusted your time and your day plan accordingly. So these are some really just quick ideas and quick tips. I'm always happy to talk more about it, so you can feel free to reach out to me or your school-based team.
Great. Erin, thanks so much. These were really fantastic strategies, and I can't wait to try some of them myself. So the next area we're going to talk about now is processing disorders and memory weaknesses, and we're really, really lucky. I absolutely adore getting to work with my partner and colleague, Kelly Mountain, and one of my favorite things of the many things that I love about Kelly is that she has an incredible insight as a school psychologist to help us understand this special consideration for our students.
Thanks, Kathleen. Yeah, I just wanted to take a couple of minutes to talk about processing and memory. And for any families that are kind of new to special education, it's kind of overwhelming about what is processing areas. And basically, when we talk about areas of processing, we're talking about our thinking and reasoning abilities that we need to learn. So that's our processing. And then when we talk about memory, we're talking about how we input information, how we store it, and then how we recall. So processing and memory are really, really important when we talk about learning. We know that all of us process information differently, and some of us may have actual disorders within our processing and memory skills. And many of our students who have learning disabilities or other special needs have processing or memory disorders. How we process information impacts our learning style and how we learn, and we need to think about what kind of learning styles our students have and what they might need to be more successful learners. So very quickly, auditory learners prefer spoken information or information through their ears. Our visual learners will prefer more visual information. Our kinesthetic learners prefer more manipulatives perhaps, and are more hands-on. We can also pair or use several modalities at once within instruction. And when we do that, it's known as multimodal instruction. And most of us do much better when we're learning with multiple modalities. So since the pandemic, you all have probably had a good opportunity to observe your students' styles. If you haven't, or you're not sure, talk to your students' teachers, their IE team members about their thoughts. And it might be, though, that your child's learning style has changed a little bit while learning virtually. I talked to several parents that they were really worried. Their entire life they've been told that their kids are visual learners, and they are having a very difficult time sitting in front of the computer screen, which is mostly visual. So talk to your team about accommodations and strategies that have worked in the past, but also talk to them about what's going on at home and what they might need in this virtual classroom. Basically, what we want to do is we want to pair our students' strengths to compensate with any of their weaknesses. Because what we know is that when we have processing and memory issues, we're going to have trouble storing and recalling information. We might be forgetful. We might be slow to respond or complete assignments, and we're going to have comprehension difficulties as well. So pairing our strengths and our weaknesses can help. For example, if kids are having trouble recalling information because of a memory deficit, we can give them a list, for example. So there are all kinds of accommodations that we can use for our children that have processing or memory issues. And just a couple of things on this next slide to consider. Again, work with your students' strengths. You know, if you really think your student is a visual learner and there's a lot of lecturing going on, see if there can be a visual that you can pair with that lecture. Also make sure that when your students are beginning an assignment, that it's clear. Make sure they understand the directions before they even begin. And then when they're done with an assignment, make sure that they have thoroughly understood the directions and that it's truly completed. A lot of our kids with processing difficulties, they might rush ahead, they might not see all the directions. So it's really important to just take that extra step to make sure. We want to make sure that we are avoiding all timed work or speed work with our kids with processing issues or memory concerns. Allow them tools to focus on concepts. We've gotten some great tips from Erin and Deb already, but kids that can use perhaps globes or maps or little cubes to count with, they're using these tools to really focus on the concept of perhaps adding or subtracting in math. Again, use your multimodal instruction with possible, and always allow for wait time for response and work completion. So those are just a couple of tips. Again, work with your team, work with your teachers, and to really try and understand what kind of a learner your child is, and then to help them based on their strengths and their weaker areas. So I'm going to turn the presentation over to Kathleen for a little bit, who's going to talk about the vital importance of considering communication needs while we're in this virtual learning environment. Kathleen?
Okay, so yeah, the final one of those 6 areas that we were going to address today as far as topics to consider is indeed communication needs. And I think you'll see 2 big words at the top of the screen: access and participation. Communication is a fundamental, basic human right, and we need to be very clear and concise in ensuring that every one of our students has a system. That's a big value of APSs, is to ensure that all students have an effective communication system and a way to communicate their wants and needs and desires. They need a communication supports that will help them access instruction and also participate in instruction. So as you are supporting your child at home and working with your IEP team, we had a few ideas for you to consider. And hopefully some of these tools can be helpful, not just with accessing virtual learning, but just with effective communication in general. And the first thing we want to do is to be sure that when kids are receiving instructions, that they're clear directions. The use of visuals can really help. And sometimes we need to be mindful that we might need to simplify language. So instead of perhaps giving a child a 2 or 3 step direction, maybe we just chunk that down, give them one at a time, and really use simple language to be sure that they're understanding what we're trying to communicate. And one of the ways that we can do that is to use what we call comprehension checks. And that's basically just checking in with your child to make sure, maybe having them repeat back, okay, so tell me again what you're going to get when you run upstairs. I'm going to go get my pencil or my backpack. So we want to use those comprehension checks. Kelly just talked a little bit about processing and using wait time. And it's important with students with communication needs to give them the time and space that they need to be sure that they've had a chance to process the language and understand it, and also giving them wait time for response. Some kids are very quick to respond. Other children, we might have to be a little more patient and give them time to help us understand what they're trying to communicate. One of the most wonderful assets I think many of our students with communication needs have are their speech and language pathologists. So we have an amazing team of speech and language therapists. Many of you may have a speech and language therapist on your child's IEP team. So we really encourage you to seek and solicit their advice and their input on how, in this virtual learning environment, the team and you at home can support understanding, promote expressive communication, and also to promote social communication, because that's going to be critical as well. Some of our learners have special systems called augmentative and alternative communication systems. And these are often devices that children use to communicate. So it's very critical for families and for students to work together with the team to discuss how can the device be paired to ensure that child's participation. So for example, do we have a clear way for a child to answer a question using their device? Making sure that you work through your the technical components and elements of augmentative and alternative communication systems with your team, such as talking about the means of access. What kind of keyboard or adapted keyboard needs to be in place? Do we need a touchscreen device or switch, etc.? So I'm sure that your child's case carrier will be reaching out to you to ensure that that's all in place to start the school year. And then finally, one of the things that we've learned a lot about augmentative and alternative communication is the critical importance of modeling use of the device. And this was a great tip, actually. In the next slide, we'll talk about tips from parents, but making sure that if your child's using a device, that you are familiar with the system and you can model the use of that device with your child. So those are a few things to consider. And I mentioned just talking with parents. I had the very good fortune to recognize very early in my career as a special education teacher that I had an awful lot to learn from the parents of my students. You have tremendous expertise about your child. You're your child's first teacher. You know your child's best, and you know your child best. And certainly in this virtual environment, you have tremendous amount of information to share with the team. So as we were preparing for this presentation, I did reach out to some of the parents in our community who had great ideas on things that they've experienced during this virtual learning in the spring that they think might be helpful moving forward in the fall. And some of those ideas, I'll let you read them on the screen, but using music to teach concepts. Some kids respond really well to that. Another mom suggested, she has a child with some visual issues as well as other learning issues, and she was able to mirror what was on the screen onto a larger screen in the home, such as a television screen. We mentioned that modeling communication. And also focusing not so much with your child when you're communicating on compliance, but focusing on helping them express how they feel. And Deb and Erin, I think, both touched on, all of those feelings are okay, and we really want to value our child's communication. Parents said, ask for help from your team. So if you need help with training to use a device or training on a certain strategy, reach out and let your team know what supports that you might need. Another parent suggested, we're going to have both synchronous and asynchronous learning that Deb talked about early in the presentation, but talk with your team about opportunities for your child to engage with some of that synchronous learning outside of those synchronous delivery windows. And then finally, and I think this was great advice, was collaborating with the team on different approaches and suggestions, acting early. If there are concerns, make sure that you work them out and iron them out with the team early on so that we don't wind up in a situation where a child is not set up for success. And finally, try not to get discouraged and disengaged. So thank you to the great parents who gave us that advice, and I know we're going to continue learning together during this upcoming year. One of the other great benefits, I think, that we have access to are our students. We really, sorry, I know I was missing, my computer was not quite keeping speed with the slides here, so let me just go back. We've talked a lot about staff support and family engagement, but the most important thing at the heart of the upcoming mission we have in delivering virtual learning is indeed talking with our students and supporting our students. And we're very fortunate. One of the parents that I reached out to had some suggestions from her child, and it was a great reminder. We have a phrase in special education called "nothing about me without me." So we're very fortunate that we have one of our young students whose name is LJ, who shared some of his perspectives based on the spring about what we should all be mindful of as we plan for virtual learning. So I'm going to Hope this video works. Let's see if we can get this up here.
The biggest tip I have is making sure that families or students get the assignments and presentations in advance. Any assigned reading passages, books to be downloaded, any PowerPoints, videos on how to send as early as possible. This way, if teachers don't have time to tailor it or if a student needs to follow along, they can participate with their peers. Some vocabulary and some motor pathways need to be taught ahead of time. Sometimes friends need different colors or backgrounds to see. Having these materials in an editable format is crucial to access.
Okay, so thank you so much to LJ for sharing his really wise and important feedback with us. And I think that's just a great reminder again to talk with your child and talk with them, as they're able to tell you what worked well in the spring, what was challenging, so that you're ready then to collaborate with your IEP team. The Parent Resource Center for many, many years has worked with families in navigating the special education process. We tell families all the time, you are a critical member of your child's IEP team. Certainly during the school closure and pandemic, one of the bright spots, I think, in silver linings is an even deeper understanding for families of what school looks like for their child. What are their strengths? What are their successes? And what are their needs? So I think several of our presenters, I know Kelly mentioned a little bit earlier, are going to be preparing to work with IEP teams to align IEPs with this new virtual learning model, and to really look at, is the IEP as it stands right now effective and set up to support your child? And if not, what needs to happen? Kelly and I think if we could share one tip, the one tip we always share, not just for this virtual learning setting, but any IEP meeting, is communicating with your IEP team in advance of meetings if possible. We're going to share our contact information at the end of this presentation, but we actually have even a little template that we designed during the virtual learning pandemic closure so that families can share information in advance with the IEP team, because then hopefully when you do have your virtual meeting with your IEP team, it'll help the team be prepared to come to address and answer your questions. So when we think about the IEP process, I think, it's really well designed to ensure success. So again, we start first with encouraging families to share your input and your questions so that the team is prepared to come and address those ideas and questions at the meeting. Be an active participant. You've probably got a wealth of information to share since you've been watching your child be a virtual learner for several months now. So participate in the development of the IEP meetings, as well as any revisions or changes that need to happen throughout the year. One of the other really important things that helps us and informs our instruction is when we take good data. So talk with your team about how is the team going to collect data on your child's performance? How do we know if things are going well? And if they are, that's great. How do we know if things are not really going well and maybe need to be tweaked a little bit? So talk at the IEP meeting about how that's going to happen and develop an ongoing communication plan so that everybody can hopefully have a regular method of communicating and checking in, sharing feedback and information amongst all the team members, sharing input from your student, encouraging students to be part of the IEP team. Develop an effective communication plan so that your team is structured for success and hopefully structured to celebrate what we hope will be great outcomes for your child this year. Okay, so we know we've shared a tremendous amount of information with you. And we also know that there's so many more topics that we will look forward to addressing, but we wanted to let you know where you can find these resources. So this presentation will be part of the new Parent Academy that's being rolled out, and we'll also, I'm sure, have links to it on the Parent Resource Center webpage. There are a lot of resources. We'll be sure to put the handouts from this session and other resources on our webpage at www.apsva.us/PRC. You can call us at 703-228-7239. Kelly's been checking that, and our assistant Emma and myself frequently, so we'll get back to you if you leave us a message. And then finally, you can also reach us by email at prc apsva.us. We do look forward to continuing to develop more materials and to work with you during the next few months of school.
So I just want to close out and thank all of you for being with us today. Keep in touch with us. Please let us know how we can support you. I also want to just take a second to thank Deb and Aaron. They are such great resources for all of us and for our families. And they have mentioned that reach out to them if need be, but especially to your teams. So again, thank you, and let's hope to have a really good start on September 8th.